How much has the world changed in 100 years? And what recent demographic shift is creating a major challenge for mission? That and much more, including a small village and the Big Apple, coming up on Global Mission Snapshots.
Just before he went up to heaven, Jesus gave us a command. He gave us a mission. Jesus said, "Go. Go unto all the world, telling them of His love." This is our mission. This is our global mission.
Hello and welcome to Global Mission Snapshots. I'm Gary Krause from Adventist Mission. 100 years ago, the world was a very different place. Women in most so-called developed countries couldn't vote. Model T Fords were being mass-produced throughout the United States, and far more people lived in the country than lived in cities. Today, things have drastically changed. For the first time in world history, more people live in cities than in the country. On today's program, we'll be talking with Rick McEdward, the Global Mission Study Center's director, about the challenges of urban mission. We'll also visit the country of Taiwan, where nearly 70% of the population is urban. And we'll visit New York City. But before we head to the cities, let's visit a small village in South Africa.
My name is Nakwanda, and I live in a small town called Ingwavuma, which is located in the northern part of South Africa. Life here is very simple, though my own life is a little complicated. My cousin and I live with our grandmother because our mothers are in another town working. I love to play with my puppy dogs, and they love to give me big kisses. My favorite thing to do is to read about the life of Jesus when he was a little boy. I imagine myself living back then and experiencing all the things that he did. I share a room with my cousin, which can be really tough, but I am happy when I am able to spend some time by myself reading the stories from the Bible. On Sabbath, we get cleaned up and prepare for church. Sometimes the water can be really cold. I then put a cream on my face and hands to keep my skin smooth. It feels really good. Finally, I use a pick to comb my hair. When I am ready to go, my cousin and I head off for church, which is about 2 miles away. Our church meets in the local community center since we don't have our own building to worship in. There is only one room, so the children have to meet outside under a tree. We love learning about Jesus from our teacher, and we really love to sing. Angels are watching over us. We are dead. This quarter, part of your 13th Sabbath offerings will help to provide a small building where all of us children can meet each Sabbath. Then, we will have a proper place where we can invite our friends to come and learn about Jesus too. Thank you for helping to support missions all around the world.
My guest is Laurie Falvo, and Laurie, you are a member of the Adventist Mission team involved in communication, and it's your first time on 3ABN. Welcome.
Thank you.
You see a lot of stories about mission, global mission, church planting. What does it make you feel to see the stories that come across your desk?
It's very heartwarming.
And what do you see as the major challenges that we're facing?
Well, recently I had the opportunity to go to Taiwan, and it was my first time in Asia. So I have never been anywhere before where there were so few Christians and just a handful of Adventists. The challenge in spreading the gospel there and the Adventist message is that the people are very deeply rooted in Buddhism, and there is a very strong cultural mandate to follow to respect your elders and follow what they want. And so if you're a child, you do what your parents want. If you're a parent, you do what your grandparents want. And breaking out of that is disrespect to the family, and also can bring, they believe it can bring harm to the family. So it's very hard to evangelize.
So it's not just a question of, oh, I'm going to try a different option in my religion and everything's okay. It's part of your culture, your family.
It is, although increasingly, and this surprised me, the younger generation is not so religious. They're becoming more and more secular.
Right.
And they're not really feeling a need for God in their lives at all, or religion at all.
So what is the Adventist Church doing in Taiwan?
We have 12 global mission projects there, at which we have pioneer missionary movement pastors that are from Taiwan that have come to...
From Korea?
From Korea, yes. They've come to share some time in their lives. Their families have moved over. They've learned the language, and they're there to share the gospel. And their main focus is the Han Chinese, of which there is more than 90% of the population has a Chinese origin, and only 1 in 11,000 is a Seventh-day Adventist. So it's a huge outreach opportunity.
And when you look at the Adventist Church in Taiwan, the vast majority of the members come from the hill tribes, the minority population.
Yes.
And so these pioneer missionary movement pastors, I mean, they're fully trained pastors who have left Korea. They come to plant churches in this very challenging area. When I visited there a few years ago, I remember that one of the things they were using was that people were very interested in Korean culture because they watched all the Korean soap operas on the TV. And so they would have Korean music, they'd dress up in Korean clothes, and people would come to meetings just to see that. Yeah.
The Lord can use some very interesting things to reach hearts.
Yeah, so these are very dedicated church planters. We also have a hospital, I understand. Yeah.
We have a beautiful facility over there that has won many awards from the government for helping to prevent disease for the public and to help them enjoy maximum health. We have a New Start Center out in the countryside, and we have, at the hospital they have a vegetarian restaurant and health classes and educational classes for the public. So they have made many, many contacts for God through their medical services. And another medium we have over there for mission is our school system. We have an elementary school and 2 academies and a college. And I was talking to some of the teachers, and nearly 98% of the students are non-Christian. Many have never heard the name of Jesus, never seen a Bible before. The principal's wife at the elementary school was telling me about this little boy in one of her classes, and all of a sudden he stops and he looks up at her and he said, "Mrs. Robinson, can you tell me about your Jesus?" And she's just thinking in her mind, you know, what a wonderful opportunity, and I don't want to mess this up. This may be my only chance with this child. And
yeah. Any other stories from the education work?
Yeah, there was. I actually met the principal of one of the academies, and he was telling me about a Bible teacher and was saying that being a Bible teacher is probably the hardest challenge in teaching at those schools. And the teacher came back to the States feeling like he had not been very successful at all in sharing Jesus. And he moved back near Andrews University in Michigan. And it so happened that a group of the students from the academy came over to Andrews for a summer program. And since he lived nearby, he invited these students to come over to his house. He had a big meal for them, fun activities planned. And everybody seemed to have a good time, and then the kids left, and that was it. Until he saw that one of the girl students had posted on Facebook a message saying that she had been over to that family's home, and they had had so much fun. It was the most fun she'd had all summer. And then she was kind of teasingly said, you know, "Can your family adopt me?" And then she said, "I love you guys, and thank you so much for telling me about Jesus and about the Bible."
Wow.
So he knew, yeah, it may feel like nothing is happening, and sometimes it may take years, but seeds are being planted for the future.
Now we have Pastor Samuel Wang, who is part of one of our study centers for reaching Buddhists, who is based in Taiwan. Just briefly, what sort of work is he doing?
He is developing contextualized material for reaching the Buddhists. My understanding is that there's a different group of Buddhists in Taiwan, in that area, than there is, say, like in Thailand. He's focusing on reaching that particular people group, not only there, but all over the world. So he travels, he meets with church leadership, helps them understand the Chinese culture so that they then are able to plant churches for Chinese people all over the world.
Fantastic.
Interestingly, his wife, wanting a ministry of her own, has started an after-school program for neighborhood children at her church. And she is seeing, like there was one little girl that was very sullen, very angry, and she has seen her play well with other children, learn to become a loving little girl. Yeah, she's seeing positive changes in the lives of the kids.
Wonderful. Laurie, thanks so much for sharing with us.
Thank you.
And viewers at home, it's hard to imagine the tremendous challenge in places like Taiwan throughout the 1040 window. It's hard to conceive, but please pray for Taiwan. Please pray for the people in the 1040 window. I'm glad to welcome my friend and colleague, Pastor Rick McEdward. Rick is the director of the Global Mission Study Centers. Rick, what are the Global Mission Study Centers?
The study centers are different centers around the world that really operate for the church to help Adventists be a cordial witness to non-Christians in different settings.
Okay, now, one of the large mission challenges that we're facing as a church are the urban areas.
Sure.
Now, for like the last 100 years, we've made this a priority. We've put a lot of resources and people into the cities for, is that correct?
Well, you know, actually, there seems to be a reluctance on our part to engage in city ministry. We long for the country life, don't we? Mm-hmm. And so because of some of the emphasis that we've had on country living, we may have actually sided on the side of neglecting the cities by avoiding the tendencies in the cities, that some of the behavior and the different things we see that we don't like, we avoid them, and so we've neglected the cities.
Now, I'm glad you said that word, neglected, those words, neglected the cities, because Ellen White said that 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago,
right.
We've neglected the cities. Now, at the moment, within Adventist Mission and within the church, there's a focus on urban mission again. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, you know, it started in 2005, 2006 with Hope for the Big Cities, but just recently, last October, Pastor Ted Wilson, our World Church president, gave us a resounding call to focus our energies on the cities. And he just didn't call us just as pastors. He called every member of the World Church to focus our attention on comprehensive work in the cities. So work that would not just be public evangelism, it would include that, but that it would be person to person, it would be church to community, it would be finding ways of interacting in the city that maybe we haven't tried before.
Now, this has been a focus of Global Mission for many years, and
Yes.
so we're delighted now that the World Church is focusing on it so intently. Within the Office of Adventist Mission, we are focusing on what we call centers of influence. Can you tell us about that?
You know, many people live in the cities, and New York City has 800 languages in it. Among that group, you'll find Muslims, Buddhists, postmodern, secular people of all kinds, and yet they have a lot of barriers built up for stepping foot inside of a church. So when we invite people in the community to a church, they may not readily come, but to establish a center of influence, a place that has a neutral zone where we can do activities, we can do events, we can teach health, we can have community concerts and blood pressure checks and vegetarian cooking schools and these kind of events where there's not the buildup of bias against Christianity. Well, it offers a neutral zone for them to come and for us to build friendships, hopefully for eternity.
Now, is this an idea that we came up with?
Of course not. This is Ellen White's own concept, right. And she shared it with us some years ago I think it was 1904 when she wrote about the beehive in San Francisco. And at that time, there was this beautiful ministry going on that had elder care and ministry to the sailors in the port. They had a vegetarian cafe, an orphanage. They had so many different kinds of ministry that were reaching out to the community. And she used that as an example of what every urban center ought to have.
Right. Now, you were serving as a missionary for some time in Southeast Asia. Now, I know in the city of Jakarta, there has been a focus on urban mission. Can you briefly describe what's been happening there?
Well, a few years ago, 2006, they held a strategic planning session. I was part of it. And they decided that over the next 5 or 6 years, they would actually double the amount of churches and members. They would go from 12,000 to 20,000 members, 102 churches to 204 churches, starting new congregations all over the city. Those new congregations would actually come from integrated work where people were helping their neighbor, where they would loving, in a very non-Christian context, they would be engaging and loving their communities. And we have seen health work and church planting, new congregations, house churches, all kinds of things happen in Jakarta. Some of the members themselves have done public evangelism and shared Christ in a new way, but a lot of it has been focused on small groups.
Now, part of your territory that you were caring for was the city of Bangkok.
Yeah.
Tell me about the tower in Bangkok.
You know, there's this, my favorite place to pray is the tallest building in any city. And in Bangkok, there's this beautiful city tower. It has a revolving outside deck, and you go up there at night. And as this deck revolves, you can look over the lightscape of the entire city. It goes on and on and on, beyond what the eye can see. And you realize that every day, 12 million people are there in that city who don't yet know Jesus. Our church there is small. And so to go into a place like that and to pray for God's Spirit to move and to bring people close to Him.
Rick, thank you so much for sharing with us today. It is indeed a daunting challenge, and we look at the cities and we say, who is sufficient for these things? But God has a plan, and we want to be part of that. So please pray for urban mission. Please pray for the new centers of influence around the world. The urban areas of the world are such a huge mission challenge for us for many reasons. First of all, they're so big. There are just so many people, and they are rapidly growing. Just recently, for the first time, more than half of the world's population now lives in cities. You just mingle in the cities and you see that people are just so busy. Just to have even the time to listen to somebody talking about Christianity is a challenge. You know, a global mission pioneer, for example, goes into a village in a rural area and they get an audience immediately. They're the best show in town, but you know, come here into the middle of New York City and it's a place of so much different choice and option. People have restaurants and theaters and concert halls and museums and just so busy. And to even physically reach people, to even have access into their apartments is a huge challenge. In the urban areas, people tend to be more postmodern. They are much more open to different viewpoints, but they don't think that any is more important than any other. It's up to each person to make that decision. It's a field of relativism where Christianity is no more important than any other worldview. And people are hardened. They've heard it all before. How do we even begin to make the gospel meaningful to these people? And in these cities, we have people who are very rich, increased with goods. They feel as if they have need of nothing. But we also have the desperately poor. And we also have the challenge that it is just so expensive to work in the cities. It would take a huge budget if we were to run a traditional evangelistic series in the heart of New York City. So these are just some of the things that together make the cities such a daunting challenge. But a challenge it is, and it's a challenge that we as a church must focus on. For more than 150 years, Central Park has proved an urban oasis for busy New Yorkers. This 850-acre park of woodlands and streams and rivers and lakes and lawns is a place where people can come away for a while, to relax, to enjoy the sun, to go for a walk. There's even a zoo in the middle of the park, some 24,000 trees. You come here any season of the year and people are coming here with their families, elderly people, kids, just a place where they can come away for a while, where they can relax, where they can just have some time away from the busyness of their lives. Central Park connects to the lives of New Yorkers. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we as Seventh-day Adventists could connect to urban dwellers in a way that Central Park does? More than 100 years ago, Ellen White had a vision for urban connection points. She called them centers of influence. These were to be centers of holistic ministry in urban areas, not huge institutions, but smaller plants where Adventists could minister in a holistic way to the community in urban areas. She became very disturbed when she saw resources being put into one or two large institutions that grew and became very almost inwardly focused. She wanted to see it spread out. She wanted it to be where the people were in the urban areas. And these holistic centers of influence were to connect with people's needs. She saw things such as restaurants, literature, treatment rooms, all sorts of things that would reach out to the people's needs in the community. Today, this idea more than 100 years ago has life. What can we do to start these centers that will place us where the people are so that, like Jesus, we will connect to them in a way that will touch their needs and touch their hearts? When we look at our mission to the cities, we can talk about different models and methods and approaches, but we must make sure that they are based on Jesus' example. Ellen White summarizes that as Christ's method, and she says that it had 5 important components. First, he mingled. Secondly, he showed sympathy. 3, he ministered to needs. 4, he won confidence. And then, and only then, he bid them follow me. We can't skip any of these steps. Each one of them is vitally important. And too often we come in and we preach at people and we tell them truth and we deliver the message, and we haven't really earned the right. We haven't mingled, we haven't showed sympathy, we haven't ministered to needs, and we certainly haven't won confidence. So when we're looking at our urban mission, we must make sure that we base it on Christ's method, and Christ's method alone, which Mrs. White tells us is the only way to have true success. The first step is mingling. Ellen White says that Christ mingled among people as one who desired their good. And as you read through the Gospels, you see how there were some times when Jesus spoke to large crowds of people, but he also had that one-on-one connection with a lone Nicodemus at night, with the woman at the well. You see him touching the eyes of the blind men, touching the hands of lepers. He was physically and emotionally and spiritually engaged with the people that he connected with. And we're called to do exactly the same. When Christ came down, he mingled, he became one with us, he put on human skin, he got his hands dirty. He didn't do salvation from a distance. He did it connecting with people, becoming one with them. The second step in Christ's method is showing sympathy. This describes the stance, the perspective from which we treat people. The Gospels tell us that when Jesus saw the crowds, he looked on them with compassion, and he treated people gently and with love. We're to do exactly the same. The next step is to minister to needs. That means we need to understand our communities. We need to study the communities. We need to talk to people. We need to listen. What needs do people have? What are their interests? What do they worship? How do they spend their time? And once we get to understand our community, then we can start to serve them. And the centers of influence are holistic service centers where we connect with needs. It may be that people have physical needs. Ellen White talks about health work, health ministry as being the right arm of the message, and often this is the best way to connect. Or perhaps it may be that in the area where we have our centre of influence, there may be many single mothers, and their greatest need is just to have a few hours every week where they can drop their kids off to be cared for. Whatever it is a platform for us to minister to people's needs just like Jesus did. As a natural result of mingling, showing sympathy and ministering to needs, Jesus naturally won the confidence of people. Just see in the Gospels how sinners love to be near Jesus. Too often today, those of us who are pretty sure about how people should be living and how they should be acting and behaving, sometimes sinners don't like to hang around us. But Jesus won their confidence. And then as a natural result of that, Jesus could say to them, "Follow me." This is the ultimate result of Christ's method. People start to follow Jesus, and that's the work of the Holy Spirit as He works on our humble efforts of mingling, showing sympathy, ministering to needs. The Holy Spirit comes in and blesses and leads people to Jesus. In 1910, Ellen White said that urban ministry was the essential work for this time. 8 years earlier, she said, "We have neglected the cities." I wonder what she would say today. What a tremendous challenge we have before us, but what also an opportunity it is. Through centres of influence, through these platforms for ministry to the community, we can touch so many lives for Jesus Christ. When Moses sent the spies into the land, he asked them to check on the cities. They came back and they said, "They're large, they're well fortified." Well, today they're even larger and they're even more well fortified. But 2 spies said that we can do it with God's help. The same challenge is before us today. What a wonderful opportunity to follow Christ's method, to touch lives for Him, for His kingdom. Well, that's about it for today's program. But before we go, we'd like to offer you a free 2013 Adventist Mission Calendar, picturing people and places from around the world. These calendars focus on mission, and we'd like you to have one as a small token of thanks for your support of Global Mission. So if you live in North America, simply call our toll-free number, 1-800-648-5824, or visit our website and ask for the Adventist Mission Calendar or offer 305. Please clearly state your name and address and be sure to mention the calendar or offer number 305. I hope you've enjoyed today's program. Thank you so much for your continuing prayers, personal involvement and financial support for frontline Adventist Mission around the world. For Adventist Mission, I'm Gary Krause, and I hope you can join me right here next time on Global Mission Snapshots.